You're in the room. Before we go a single step further, tap that like button, mash that share icon, and put this on somebody's timeline who needs to see what just happened. Because what I'm about to walk you through is the kind of moment that rewrites a legacy in real time, in front of a live audience, on the biggest stage in modern music. Welcome back, family. This is the corner where we don't flinch, we don't sugarcoat, and we don't spin a fairy tale about grown men who refuse to grow up. So pull up a chair and hit subscribe, because you're going to want a permanent seat for what's coming, and trust me, it's coming fast. Let me set the temperature in this room, and I want you to feel every single word of what I'm about to say. Drake, the same man who once carried himself like he was building a throne next to Jay-Z, the same OVO figurehead who used to speak in that measured, careful, I'm the future of this thing tone, that same nearly 40-year-old international superstar, just got caught barking, literally barking, like a household pet, on a live stream in front of the entire planet, in front of an audience that used to look at him like the crown prince of modern rap. And the worst part isn't even the bark. The worst part is what came after. The worst part is the meltdown. The worst part is the fan base. The worst part is the producer. The worst part is the album title he thought nobody was going to connect. And by the end of this breakdown, I'm going to walk you through every single piece of the collapse, and you're going to see, in stunning clarity, that this is not a bad week. This is the moment the mask came off, in high definition, with the whole world holding a receipt. By now you've heard about the 20 vs 1 dating stream on Kick, tied in with Steak celebrating 9 years in business. 20 women, 1 rapper, 1 camera, a prize table, a giveaway. A dating show concept dressed up as branded entertainment. And listen, I want to be measured here, because I'm not one of those people who screams from the rooftop every time our subject breathes. I didn't hit the stream live. I didn't rush to a hot take. I let the dust settle. I let the clips circulate. I let the discourse boil. I let the group chats debate it into the ground. And what I found on the other side of the boil was something I don't think a lot of his own defenders are ready to admit out loud, in daylight, on the record. Because in his own mouth, Drake said this 20 vs 1 was almost as lit as the last one. And when he said the last one, he was referencing his own version of the Kendrick War, the chapter where he claimed 20 people jumped him, the shield he tried to use for why the biggest lyrical exchange of the modern era ended the way it ended. So think about that for a second. Absorb that in real time. He is still leaning on the 20 jump me narrative as a punchline instead of taking the loss on the chin and moving on with his life like an adult. That, by itself, tells you exactly where his head is at right now, and where it's been stuck since the summer the whole world watched him fumble. Anyway, moving on. A lot of listeners, a lot of longtime supporters, a lot of people who used to ride for the boy through every single album cycle, they said the quiet part loud this week. They said Drake is pushing 40. They said he's supposed to be the biggest artist alive. They said he should be somewhere building a family, building an empire, building a legacy, building institutions that outlast him. They said, where's the woman? Where's the household? Where's the maturity? Where's the version of the artist that used to sit on late-night television and talk about growth and evolution? And of course, the defenders came out swinging, as they always do. They said, why can't he have fun? Why can't a grown man laugh? Why do y'all take everything so seriously? But here's where this gets loud, because those exact same defenders, that exact same fan base, they were the loudest voices in the building when Kendrick had fun, when Future had fun, when Rick Ross had fun, when any artist Drake doesn't like tried to have fun. Suddenly having fun became a crime. Suddenly a chuckle became evidence. The pot has been calling the kettle black for so long the pot doesn't even remember what color it started as, and the kitchen has been on fire for years. Now, among the people who spoke up about the 20 vs 1 dating spectacle was Wayno on YouTube. Wayno said it looked embarrassing. Wayno said he expected more from a man of Drake's stature. Wayno said what a lot of people were thinking, but wouldn't say into a microphone with the record button running. And instead of letting the critique breathe, instead of laughing it off the way Drake claims he's laughing everything else off, he decided to reach into his phone, pull up a clip of Wayno reviewing a Marvel property, and post it to his Instagram story with a caption that basically said, "Look at you. You review comic books. You can't call me childish." That was the counter. That was the response. That was the retort from a nearly 40-year-old billionaire artist with a global platform and a full communications team. Drake compared reviewing a Marvel show to barking on a live stream for 20 women, as if those two activities live in the same emotional universe, on the same planet, in the same century. Here's where this gets loud. Have that conversation with him if you know him, because comic books employ grown adults. Comic books built a multi-billion-dollar theatrical business this cycle. Comic books are consumed by CEOs, by professors, by doctors, by military veterans, by the same demographic that streams Drake's music. And here's the twist that nobody in Drake's camp seems to want to acknowledge in the open. Drake's own new album is titled Iceman. Iceman. As in Bobby Drake. As in the X-Men character. As in the Marvel figure whose entire lore is documented in the exact same comic book universe Drake just tried to use as ammunition against Wayno. So the man mocking a critic for having an interest in Marvel is simultaneously naming his album after a Marvel character. That's not a slip. That's not a coincidence. That's not a small oversight. That's a self-inflicted wound with a fingerprint on the handle. And let me get to the piece of footage that turned this whole cycle nuclear. Somewhere in the middle of that 20 versus 1 stream, one of the women looked directly into his eyes, smiled, and asked him to bark. She said, "Would you bark for me?" And without hesitation, without a pause, without the dignity that a man of that caliber is supposed to carry into a public moment, he opened his mouth and barked. Then he did it again. Then he laughed. Then the internet did what the internet always does. Within 24 hours, that bark had been chopped, screwed, remixed, and layered over the Not Like Us instrumental. 11.7 billion views. 11.7 billion. That's not a number I made up. That's not a rounding error. That's not a hype figure floated by a blog. That's the audience count of the meme that got handed to the world, gift-wrapped, with a bow on top, out of his own mouth, on his own stream, on his own dime. Now here's where I have to sit you down and explain the deeper problem, because the bark is the symptom. The bark is not the disease. The disease is the pattern. The disease is the trajectory. The disease is the slow erosion of a man who used to walk into rooms like Drake carrying the future of Toronto on his back, and now walks into rooms wondering which streamer he can align with next, which betting platform he can plug next, which viral moment he can chase next, which podcaster he can meme with next. That's not a career arc. That's a slot machine. That's a man plugging himself into every dopamine outlet he can find because the music alone doesn't fill the room the way it used to, and everybody in the room can feel it. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I was in a back and forth with Charlemagne about who the closest heir to Jay-Z was in modern hip-hop. Not the best rapper. Not the hardest bar spitter. The closest heir. The one whose career shape most resembled the blueprint HOV laid out. And my answer, without hesitation, was Drake, the same Drake we're breaking down tonight. And Charlemagne looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language on a foreign planet. He pushed back. He argued for Lil Wayne. And I stood on my answer, because at the time, Drake's business empire, his brand posture, his cross-genre dominance, his ability to move markets, all of it rhymed with the Jay-Z blueprint in a way nobody else's did. That was before the beef. That was before the 20 versus 1. That was before the barking. That was before the meltdown. That was before the mask started slipping in front of the cameras he set up himself. Where's that version of Drake? Because the version I was defending in that debate would not have been anywhere near that live stream. The version I was defending would have been in a boardroom. The version I was defending would have been building a label the way HOV built Rock Nation. The version I was defending would have been buying real estate, moving equity, structuring generational wealth architecture, funding art institutions, mentoring the next wave. He would not have been on Kick, on camera, in a viral bark loop, going head-to-head with a comic book joke against a critic who runs a podcast out of a modest studio. That's not a Jay-Z career arc. That's a cautionary tale that will be taught in music business classes for the next 20 years. Here's where this gets loud again. I have a theory. And I'm going to say this, and I know it's going to get clipped and taken out of context, so let me speak clearly for the record. 20 versus 1 dating streams feel like a psychological operation dropped into the culture to keep everybody distracted from anything that matters. That's how deep the rock goes. That's how far the entertainment complex has drifted from anything productive, anything nourishing, anything that leaves the audience better than it found them. And Drake, one of the most powerful cultural figures of the modern era, has decided to plant his flag on that soil instead of the soil that made him famous in the first place. Because let's be honest with each other. Is this a serious 20 versus 1? Of course not. Nobody is leaving that soundstage with a wife. Nobody is leaving that studio with a fiancé. Nobody involved thinks they're finding love, or friendship, or anything real. It's content. It's engagement bait. It's a branded activation. It's a marketing budget dressed up as a dating show, wrapped in a betting sponsorship, with a live stream chat scrolling underneath. But content still reveals character. Content still exposes posture. Content still shows the world what you value, what you tolerate, what you associate your name with. And what this content revealed, at the level of posture, was a man who is emotionally frozen in his early 20s while chronologically approaching 40. That's the tension. That's the disconnect. That's the thing his fanbase refuses to name even in the privacy of their own group chats. And I want to be transparent with you, because I know somebody is already typing in the comments that I've been on a hunt for years. That's your right to think so. Nobody's stopping you. But as a listener, as a person who genuinely enjoys plenty of the catalog, as a person who has defended this artist in real rooms with real industry gatekeepers who wanted to write him off a decade ago, I was disappointed watching this stream. Not offended. Not outraged. Disappointed. Because I know what Drake is capable of when he actually applies himself, when he actually locks in, when he actually treats the culture like it's sacred. And this wasn't it. If this exact concept had been staged inside a music video, wrapped inside a narrative, framed inside a piece of art with a beginning and an end, I would understand. I would even respect the swing. But raw, unfiltered, live broadcast on the same platform where teenagers are grinding for scraps of visibility, that's not the flex he thinks it is. The first woman up on that stream, by the way, was Lena, who happens to be the wife of Adam 22. She walked in, and he said, "I've had this dream before." Read that sentence twice. Absorb what that means. This is the same Drake who used to build entire mythologies around distance, mystery, elusiveness, the champagne poppy silhouette, the untouchable cool. And now he's on camera telling a podcaster's wife he's dreamed about her, with her husband's name attached to her socials, with the whole internet clipping the moment in real time. That's not a bar. That's not swag. That's not confidence. That's a man reaching. That's a man reaching, and the whole planet watched him reach, and the whole planet took notes. Now, I don't line up with Wayno on every single take he's ever released. There are corners of his commentary I disagree with. There are angles he takes that I would frame differently. There are moments where I think he's too generous and moments where I think he's too harsh. But on this specific point, on the Jay-Z to modern superstar comparison in terms of personal carriage, on the way the two men present themselves outside the booth, Wayno nailed it. Because that's the actual gap. Jay writes his own material, sure. Jay has his own catalog, sure. But the deeper distance is in the walk. The way Jay carries himself in a room. The way Jay measures his words in an interview. The way Jay picks his platforms with surgical intention. The way Jay treats his silence like a currency more valuable than gold. And I used to believe Drake wanted that too. I used to believe he was quietly studying it. I used to believe he was building toward it in his own timeline. But somewhere along the way, Drake looked at the mountain, decided the climb was too steep, and pivoted. He pivoted into the steak era. He pivoted into the gambling era. He pivoted into the streamer era. He pivoted into the red pill podcaster era. He pivoted into the Morgan Wallen photo op era. He pivoted into whatever this current bark on a live stream era is going to be called in the history books. And every single pivot was a step away from HOV's blueprint and a step towards something we don't have a name for yet, but we all recognize when we see it on the timeline. There are people who will tell you the entire persona of the last 2 decades has been the greatest sustained acting performance in music history. I used to laugh at that theory. I don't laugh anymore. Because when you stack the pieces up, when you look at the assimilation, when you look at the code switching, when you look at the culture vulture accusations that have piled up like unpaid bills on a countertop, it starts to feel less like a career and more like a screenplay. A screenplay written by a man who studied hip-hop from the outside and decided he could perform it better than the people who lived it. A screenplay that ran a long time before somebody in the audience noticed the wires. Anyway, moving on to the response, because he reached at the exact wrong person. He pulled up that clip of Wayno on a Marvel panel, tagged him, wrote, "Never too old for some joy. Gang, take it easy." And on the surface, if you're on his team, you're saying he ate. He clowned him. He got him. But he didn't. Because Wayno turned around and said, "You're right, never too old for some joy, but let's talk about which joy we're actually comparing here." Because Wayno also collects. Wayno's a nerd too. Wayno has said publicly he's into comic book culture and animated series, and the whole Marvel ecosystem. That's not the flex our subject thought it was. That's actually the opposite of a flex. That's handing Wayno a microphone and telling him to speak into it clearly. And here's the part that really tears the whole thing down. His own OVO brand did a Marvel collaboration last year. Wolverine Capsule. Hulk piece. A recreation of the classic Wolverine vs. Hulk cover that literally ended up echoed inside the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. A Doctor Doom shirt. A Rogue soccer jersey. A whole run of OVO logos redesigned as Marvel characters. That is a Marvel-devoted product line. That is a comic book capsule collection. That is a merchandise strategy built on the exact fandom he tried to mock. And now the same man who put his name on that capsule is trying to shame a critic for engaging with the exact universe Drake sells merchandise about. You can't script the irony. You can't manufacture it. It's baked into the price tag on every hoodie. And I haven't even touched the album title yet. Iceman. The whole album is called Iceman. Iceman is the codename of Bobby Drake, X-Men founding member, one of Marvel's most recognizable mutants, a character with 50 years of comic book continuity behind him. So Drake is dropping an entire studio album named after a comic book character while simultaneously mocking a critic for reviewing comic book content. If Wayno had scripted this scenario himself, he couldn't have written it any tighter. If a screenwriter tried to sell this reversal to a network, the network would send it back for being too on the nose, too obvious, too heavy-handed. Now I want to zoom the camera out, because there's a bigger fish in this pond, and his name is Boy Wonder. Boy Wonder, the day one producer, the guy who's been in the room since the earliest sessions, the man who literally helped sonically construct the empire we're now watching decompose in slow motion. Boy Wonder decided to hop on Twitter and complain about hip-hop commentary at large. He wrote, "Is it only hip-hop that has this much commentary on everything the artists do? Does country music nitpick their artists? Does jazz? Does rock?" That was the tweet. That was the framing. That was the argument he decided to bring to public conversation on behalf of his boss. And I have to be respectful, because Boy Wonder is a genuine talent behind the boards. His discography speaks for itself. His placements speak for themselves. But my brother, that argument is beneath you. You know too much about music history to pretend you don't know why hip-hop generates the level of conversation it generates. Does country music have the same grip on the young black professional? Does country music drive the language, the fashion, the sneakers, the film aesthetics, the political conversations, the corporate marketing decisions of the last 30 years the way hip-hop does? Miss me with that noise. That's a false equivalence, and you know it, and everybody reading that tweet knew it too. Hip-hop isn't just music. Hip-hop is the reference layer of global youth culture. Hip-hop decides what's cool. Hip-hop decides which slang crosses over. Hip-hop decides which shoes sell out. Hip-hop decides which words end up on cable news the next morning. Hip-hop decides which streaming platforms get funded and which get abandoned. Country music does not do that. Jazz does not do that. Rock has not done that in decades. When we as a culture decide something matters, it matters everywhere. When we decide something is cringe, it becomes cringe everywhere. That's power. That's leverage. That's the birthright of the community that built this thing brick by brick. That's what Boy Wonder is asking us to quietly give up because the commentary is inconvenient for his best friend. And let me pull back the curtain further, because it's not just YouTubers. It's not just barbershop debates. It's not just the group chat. The commentary layer includes Billboard. It includes Rolling Stone. It includes Variety. It includes Complex. It includes The Fader. It includes every trade publication that runs a top 10 list every quarter and a year-end review every December. Those lists are not written for the artists. Those lists are written for us, the listeners, because publications know that hip-hop discourse drives page views, drives clicks, drives ad revenue, drives subscription conversions. So when Boy Wonder complains about the commentary, he's not complaining about a few YouTubers. He's complaining about the entire information architecture of the modern music industry, from the smallest podcast to the biggest media conglomerate. And the fan base, the fan base. This particular fan base is a species unto itself. They're the most paranoid loyalist army in modern music. They believe everyone is out to get them. They believe every critic is on a payroll. They believe every negative review is a coordinated conspiracy funded by a rival label. Have you ever been standing on a corner with a friend who's convinced the police are coming even though there is not a single officer in sight? That's this fan base every day of the week. Hyper alert. Hyper defensive. Hyper convinced that a shadow army of haters is planning their favorite's downfall in secret meetings held in undisclosed locations. Nobody is planning his downfall. Nobody has to. He's writing his own script live, in front of the cameras, on his own timeline, with his own hands. He's doing it in front of us. He's doing it on stages he built himself. Every stumble is unforced. Every embarrassment is self-authored. The barking, the dreamline, the Marvel clapback, the Iceman album title. The whole choreography of the last week is a man tripping over his own feet and blaming the sidewalk, the concrete, the shoes, the weather, and everybody else who happens to be walking by. Here's where this gets loud one more time. I have received messages this week. Direct messages, comments, voice notes, emails, from people telling me the Marvel clip was a violation. And I want to be crystal clear on this point. It was not a violation. It was a self-reveal. Because the clip used was a clip of Wayno on a returning guest panel talking about a Marvel property in his capacity as a working commentator. That's not a diss. That's a resume line. That's a credit. That's a professional appearance on somebody else's platform. Wayno was engaging with content the way commentators are supposed to engage with content. Our subject was barking on a live stream for a betting sponsor. Those two things are not the same. You cannot flatten those two activities into equivalence no matter how much editing software you throw at it, no matter how many filters you run it through. And let's talk about the deeper history for a second, because this isn't the first collision with fantasy and fandom culture. Drake has always been a collector. He has always been a hip-hop nerd in the memorabilia sense, and I mean that with zero disrespect. He owns championship rings that don't belong to him. He owns Grammy statues, plaques, jerseys, one-of-one memorabilia pieces stacked to the ceiling of a trophy room that most museums would envy. And that's fine. That's a hobby. That's a passion. That's a valid way to spend money. But it also disqualifies him from mocking somebody else for being into fantasy properties. You cannot own a 9-figure memorabilia collection and simultaneously clown a critic for owning long boxes. The math doesn't math. The receipts don't reconcile. And listen, I have to bring it back to a piece of tape a lot of loyalists want us to forget. There was a moment, years ago, when a very young Drake sat in front of a camera and expressed opinions about certain slang, certain vocabulary, certain vernacular associated with the culture he would later profit from. He called that language dirty. He called it ignorant. That's on tape. That's in the archive. That's a data point that exists whether we bring it up or not. And now that same young man is a grown adult barking on live streams and titling albums after X-Men characters. So when we talk about the arc of a career, we have to include the whole arc, not just the flattering slices that fit the current marketing plan. By now you've seen the memes. By now you've heard the remixes. By now you've watched the bark get spliced into the Not Like Us instrumental until it became its own genre of internet content, its own micro-industry of clips and edits. And there's no coming back from that layer. Once your voice becomes a punchline that pairs cleanly with your rival's diss record, the culture has decided. The culture has spoken. The culture doesn't take votes back. The culture doesn't issue retractions. The culture just moves on to the next thing, and it takes your image with it. Here's where this gets loud again, because I want to answer a comment that's been bouncing around under the last few videos. Somebody wrote, hip-hop is full of gatekeepers and haters. The other genres seem to lift each other up. That's the take. That's the argument. And I understand where it comes from, because it feels true if you're only observing hip-hop from the inside. But let me tell you why that take falls apart the second you actually spend real time in those other genres. Go sit in a country music forum. Go read the comments under a jazz album review. Go crack open the rock and roll subreddits. You will find the exact same gatekeepers. You will find the exact same haters. You will find the exact same lift each other up moments right next to the exact same tear each other down moments. Because that's not a genre problem. That's a human problem. That's what happens when a lot of people care about the same art form at the same time and everybody has an opinion and a microphone. The difference is we, as a hip-hop culture, do our arguing in public. We do our arguing on YouTube. We do our arguing on podcasts. We do our arguing on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on live streams, on radio, on television, on stages, at award shows. Everybody else does the same arguing behind closed doors, in industry rooms, in press junkets, in publicist emails you'll never see, in green rooms you'll never enter. Our transparency is our strength, not our weakness. Our willingness to hold each other accountable in daylight is what keeps the music honest. And every time a boy wonder tries to shame us for that transparency, what he's really asking for is a pass. A quiet room. A softer coverage cycle for his friend. That's not going to happen. That's not on the menu. That's not how this culture was built, and that's not how this culture is going to be dismantled. Here's the truth the camp doesn't want to accept. When you get to the league, what you do matters. That's a Wayno line, and it's a correct line. Whether LeBron drops 40 points or 10 points, ESPN is running the segment. Whether Steph goes for 60 or shoots 20% from the field, the desk is analyzing it in slow motion. That's what happens when you become a top-tier figure in your industry. The scrutiny is not a bug. The scrutiny is not harassment. The scrutiny is the price of admission to the room. If you don't want the scrutiny, don't take the ticket. And the specific scrutiny our subject is receiving right now is not disproportionate. It's not vindictive. It's not orchestrated by a rival PR firm. It's earned. It's the natural byproduct of the choices he's made about how to spend his platform. If he wants softer coverage, he can make different choices tomorrow morning. He can put out an album that doesn't need a marketing gimmick. He can appear at a black tie gala without a Twitch overlay running in the corner. He can pick up a philanthropy initiative that isn't tied to a betting sponsor. He has the money. He has the team. He has the runway. Nothing is stopping him except the man in the mirror, and the mirror is starting to look tired. Instead, we get the bark. We get the Iceman title. We get the Marvel clapback that boomerangs back into his own face at supersonic speed. We get the day one producer running defense on Twitter with arguments that don't survive first contact with anybody who's been paying attention. We get the fanbase manufacturing enemies out of thin air. We get a full circus, running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, because the boy cannot stand a single day where he is not the topic of conversation somewhere on the timeline. And here is the sentence I want you to sit with. When he's not in the conversation, he does not feel comfortable. That's the disease. That's the whole thing. That's the reason for every choice you've watched him make in the last 5 years. The steak sponsorships. The live streams. The gambling clips. The dating gimmicks. The album title bait. The subliminal shots. The alliances with controversial figures. The photo ops with polarizing personalities. Every single one of those decisions traces back to the same source code. He needs to be talked about. And if the music alone won't do it, Drake will find something else that will. Something noisier. Something messier. Something that keeps the notifications rolling in. That is not a hip-hop giant. That is not a Jay-Z blueprint. That is a man who has confused attention with respect and is now discovering the difference the hard way, in real time, on camera, in front of 11.7 billion viewers who used to root for him and now clip him for their group chats. Drop your take in the comments. Tell me you disagree. Tell me you're still with the boy. Tell me you think this is all overblown, that it's just a live stream, that fans are entitled to fun, that critics are entitled to nothing. I want the whole spectrum in the comment section, because we don't ban opinions in this room. We interrogate them. We hold them up to the light. We test them against the tape. And the tape does not lie. The tape has never lied. The tape has no incentive to protect anybody. The tape shows us exactly what happened, exactly who barked, exactly who reached, exactly who fumbled the response, and exactly who titled the album after the X-Men character he now pretends is beneath him. If you're new here, welcome to the family. This is the corner where we take the culture seriously, where we take the music seriously, where we take the commentary seriously, because if we don't, nobody else is going to do it for us. Pull up a chair. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because tomorrow is another day in this cycle, and something else is going to shake loose, and I'm going to be right back in this exact seat breaking it down for you piece by piece with the same energy, the same detail, the same commitment to the tape. Have that conversation with him if you're close enough to have his ear, because the rest of us are watching from the cheap seats and taking notes in ink that doesn't wash out. Peace to Wayno for holding his ground under pressure. Peace to every critic who kept it honest when it wasn't popular. Peace to every fan who's brave enough to admit their favorite artist is going through something in public and needs an intervention. And peace to the culture, the one that made all of this possible in the first place, the one that will still be here long after this news cycle burns itself out and the next one takes its place. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay dangerous out there. Family, we out. Before I let you out of this room, let me leave you with one final piece of tape, one final thought, one final loop to carry into tomorrow morning. Because the 20 versus 1 situation, the Wayno situation, the Boy Wonder situation, the Iceman album title situation, none of it exists in isolation. All of it is symptomatic of a larger drift in modern hip-hop, a drift where the biggest artists in the genre feel obligated to compete with streamers instead of with each other, where the currency of the culture has quietly shifted from bars to clips, where an artist can sell out arenas and still feel invisible unless he's trending on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of a random news cycle. That is the actual crisis. Drake tonight is just the loudest example of it. Think about how many top-tier artists in this genre have quietly outsourced their identity to the algorithm. Think about how many albums roll out now with a live stream campaign instead of a proper listening experience. Think about how many artists you can name off the top of your head who used to feel like architects of a movement and now feel like content creators chasing engagement metrics on a dashboard they refresh every 15 minutes. It's not a one-man problem. It's a symptom. It's a case study. And case studies are useful because they show us, in vivid color, what happens when the compass stops pointing north and starts spinning wherever the wind blows loudest. So the question I'll leave you with tonight is not whether Drake is finished. He's not finished. He has too much money, too much infrastructure, too much residual goodwill baked into his catalog to be finished by a single live stream. The question is whether he will course correct, whether he'll take a step back, whether he'll close the laptop, put the phone down, exit the group chat with the streamers, and rebuild whatever piece of himself he lost during this era. Because if he doesn't, this cycle will not stop. There will be another Bark. There will be another Iceman. There will be another Wayno moment. There will be another Boy Wonder tweet. There will be another photo with the wrong person at the wrong party. And each one will chip away at the statue until there's nothing left but a memory of who he used to be when we all still believed in the story. Have that conversation with him if you have his number. The rest of us will be right here, watching, documenting, breaking it down beat by beat, tape by tape, tweet by tweet. Drop your take in the comments. Pull up a chair and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on the bell. Share this with somebody who thinks he's untouchable, because untouchable was last decade. This decade is different. This decade is transparent. This decade is honest. This decade has the receipts. And this decade is not going to let a superstar bark on camera and pretend it didn't happen. Peace, family. Stay locked in. I'll catch you tomorrow, same corner, same energy, same commitment to keeping this culture honest. Because that's what this show has always been about, from day one, from the first episode one ever posted on this channel. We track the tape. We hold the mirror up. We refuse to bend the story to protect anybody's brand, including Drake's, including his allies, including the loudest voices in his camp. That's the covenant we made with you the first time you subscribed, and it's the covenant that keeps this seat warm every single week. That's the deal. That's the promise. That's the reason we keep showing up in this seat, cycle after cycle, breakdown after breakdown, no matter who's on the hot seat this week.